Hello there, my name is Christopher Pratt and I'm a lecturer in history at the University of Leeds. And I'm here today to talk to you about what will be for many of you a new way of progressing through your history course by a historical inquiry where you have to produce an extended piece of writing for yourself that attempts to answer a specific question or attempts to resolve a particular issue that's been the cause of debate amongst historians. There's one thing that I need to start off with before we get going. You and your class will be doing your historical inquiry with a particular examining board, and will be doing a slightly different piece of work to a different class in a different school or a different sixth form that is using a different examining board. So I can't be too specific in terms of the eventual output that you're going to be creating, because if I tell you what to do according to one set of rules, it might not be very helpful if you then have to go away and do it with a different set of rules. So instead, my talk today will focus on the sorts of study skills that you need to use to produce an effective piece of work. And hopefully one of the things that will come out of this talk is that the skills that you need to use in creating an effective historical inquiry are actually common sense. You'll have used a lot of them before, since way before you started your GCSEs. This should be reassuring. Basically, all you need to do is apply these skills that you've already learnt in a focused and consistent manner, and you'll be half the way there to producing this extended piece of writing. So my talk today is going to be divided up into 4 sections. Firstly, using history books. I understand it's the first time a lot of you will have used proper history books for the first time, so how to negotiate those. Secondly, dealing with historiography. Thirdly, researching primary sources. And fourthly, the actual writing process. So we're going to pick things up at the point where you've decided on the topic and on the question that you're going to be addressing. And this is something that's going to be very personal to you. It's going to be very much a choice that's going to be based on the sorts of things you've already done in class. So we're also going to be based upon what your own personal interests are. And I can't be specific enough to help you make that choice. So we're going to assume that you've got your topic and you've got your question. Where do you start? In the first place, before you start looking at the primary sources, is to get involved with the history books. Get a sense of what others have said about the topic before you start delving into those primary sources for yourself. You'll benefit from doing this in 2 ways. Firstly, you'll already be aware of the main issues and the main players in your historical topic. You'll also already know and understand a lot of the terms that come up repeatedly that are used during the period you're studying. These terms are usually left unexplained in the primary sources because they're terms that we use a lot more frequently then than they are today. So if you're using a secondary work to try and understand these terms at the beginning before you get involved in the primary sources, it will make things a lot easier. Secondly, you're also better off starting with these secondary sources because you'll be aware, before you approach the primary sources, of the real debates, the real controversial topics, the things that have really motivated historians to write about this stuff over the years. So once you come to the primary sources, it's best if you already have an idea of the debates that are going on. So when you actually get into the sources, rather than simply copying everything down that each source says, you're looking for the things that have sparked the most interest. So how do we find books that are relevant? The best type of book you usually need to start with when you're dealing with this for the first time is a book that's on the border between popular history and academic history. And when I say popular history, I mean the sort of thing you'd be able to buy in Waterstones. When I say specialist academic work, I mean the sorts of things you might find in a university library. You ideally want, first off, before you start reading anything else, is to find a book that's written for people that don't know a huge amount about that topic and that's prepared to help the reader out with new or difficult terms. But you don't want to read something that's so popular that it's not serious enough and it's more like a historical novel. And it helps at hand here when it comes to picking these kinds of books, because it's exactly this type of book between these 2 fields, between the serious and between the more popular works. It's precisely this type of book that usually gets a good deal of respect from the quality press. So have a look around the book sections of the online archives of The Guardian, The Times, or The Daily Telegraph. And if your school has a subscription to it, you might even be able to get access to an online archive for a publication that specifically deals just with exactly this kind of book reviewing that you're looking for. Good examples of these are the London Review of Books, the New York Review of Books, and the Times Literary Supplement. Also, have a word with your parents or guardians who might have actually studied this topic already at school or university for themselves. And of course, your teachers, who will have read a good deal and will know a lot of the work besides the sorts of textbooks that you use in class. Now, this job of finding books might be a bit daunting at first, but bear with it. Once you get started, it's something that only gets easier over time. It gets easier because when you read these books, they often mention other historians' names in them. So once you've read 1, 2, 3 books, you're getting into it, you might find names or particular works that crop up a lot more than others. And this is a good way of it becoming, by just reading these first introductory works, is a very good way of getting aware of the topics that, or the historical works that are very, very prominent within your research area. So stick with it basically, and you'll reap rewards. For expert opinions, however, put your faith in your teacher or in the opinions of an experienced book reviewer rather than Wikipedia. This is a growing problem in my own teaching experience at university. People come to university and they're still using Wikipedia to write their essays. A general rule of thumb is that your work should start off by distrusting Wikipedia. It might be correct, but there are far more reliable ways of checking what's out there and worth reading than looking at the footnotes of a Wikipedia article. As I say, this is a useful tip to start applying now, because if you're going on to study at university, referencing using Wikipedia is a very sure way of getting marks deducted. So, you've got your books on a topic that have been recommended by a trusted authority. They're sat there on your desk. What on earth do you do with them? Now, you get 1 mark if you just tried to backchat me by saying read them, but you'd get a bonus mark if you'd said read with a set purpose in mind. Whilst you may think that 4,000 words is a lot of space to fill up, you'll quickly find it isn't. Your written work will need to be focused to the point with no unnecessary deviations. You're not telling a story. You're analysing factors that account for a particular change, and you're looking at a bigger picture. You're looking at where your issue fits into that broader narrative. The only stuff that needs to go into the end product of what you're writing is stuff that either sets the scene by providing a background, or which directly answers the question you're tackling. Making notes on everything is just wasting your time. Before you open the book then, you need a list of research questions. What questions would you hope the book would answer? Once you have a list of what you want answered, spend most of your time taking down notes on things that you think answer the questions that you have set the book. Everything else you can summarise very quickly if it's new to you, but just as much as is necessary for you to understand the world in which your topic lives. So you've decided what to look for. How do you take notes? People work in very different ways, so I can't give you a definite answer on this. Bear in mind, everything that I'm saying today in my talk is all suggestions. It's born out of my own experiences and from talking to other historians. So this is only a suggestion. I don't use mind maps personally. I know a lot of people that do. They work for very well. Instead, what I do is I write things down on a piece of paper, keep it old school, use a pencil and paper, but I save a lot of time by using abbreviations. When you start out on your research, you'll quickly find that you use some words more than others. For these words, you look for an extreme way of cutting down the length of what you're writing on your paper. I cut them down using full stops. What I mean is, for instance, if I'm reading about politics in the 20th century, you find that the words nation and nationalism come up quite a lot. And instead of writing nation in my notes, I use N dot. When I first started out with that abbreviation, after a while, I quickly found it became second nature, and then it became very easy to use that initial abbreviation, expand it to take into account other words. So use that as the building blocks to then go and expand your armoury of abbreviations. So therefore, for nationalism, I use N.M. Whilst for nationalisation, I use N.L.N. And similarly, whenever I see G and D in my notes, I know that I'm referring to William Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli. Now, this isn't rocket science, just a little tip that will help you get through your work. But just remember, keep a list in the front of your folder with each word that you've abbreviated, accompanied by what you've abbreviated it to. Because if you go away for a few days, come back to it, you don't want to be faced with a whole load of hieroglyphics. So just keep a track of what you've decided to abbreviate.